What's the most heartbreaking situation you've witnessed between your parents? My mom and dad have been together for nearly 40 years. They definitely love each other in their own ways, but I think the relationship is pretty toxic by today's standards. Maybe it's something from their generation, or maybe that's an excuse I make for my father's behavior, but the house runs as you might expect. My dad does not help clean or cook, and cannot shop for groceries to save his life, but of course, he manages the finances and gives my mom an allowance for all of her needs, including groceries. Beyond that, my dad can just be a difficult person to talk to. Any criticism or any comment that he interprets as criticism will immediately be met with hostility. He is very, very cheap, and while my mom has access to their money, every dollar she spends is watched over, and anything out of place will end up in an argument. For years my mother has not spent anything outside of the allowance he provides her. But here's the thing, they are now both retired and have plenty of money and assets, but most of their cash flow comes from my mom's pension. Beyond that, for the final 10 or so years of their careers, my mother made more than my dad. He is also cheap with his time. He does things he likes to do, and that is it. If he doesn't want to do it, then it isn't happening. That means cleaning and sometimes even personal hygiene are things that just aren't happening. For this, I think my mom has pent up bitterness for years towards my father. She is on an antidepressant. My father thinks it is because she works too hard at her volunteer center, but no one has said that to him. My mom tried to go to marriage counseling with him, but he refused, so she went alone. I live about 3,000 miles away, and I know I could never live with my dad again either, so I have a lot of sympathy for my mom in this. This came to a head for both of us when my mom fainted on Sunday and went to the hospital. She has been stable and awake the whole time, but her BP and heart rate were extremely low, so they couldn't release her. Over the week when I called in, she was almost always alone. My father would go in each day, but after 30 minutes to an hour would get bored and go home and watch TV, leaving my mom alone for the rest of the day. Finally, Wednesday night came, and my mom was still alone and still in the hospital with no real end in sight, so I booked a last-minute flight and arrived on Thursday. I'll be in town until Sunday morning. Communication between my parents has deteriorated, and now I can see it firsthand. My mom is so frustrated and hurt that she has become very distant from my dad and is often short with him. I do not think my dad really even notices. Maybe he does, so he is just trying to stay out of her hair. It is extremely unclear, and any type of asking would definitely lead to him becoming combative. I went back to my parents' house where my brother also lives, and the place is not clean. Toilets and showers are completely gross. Floors and countertops are covered in dust and dog hair. The whole house has an odor that I'm all too familiar with from my childhood. I slept there in my old room, woke up, and got ready to go back to the hospital to spend my day. My dad was at the kitchen table and I said to him, "Think you can vacuum while I'm out so mom can come home to a clean house?" "I don't think that's going to happen." "What? Dad, we don't all have the same standard of cleanliness as you do." "Really, dude?" "Yes, really, dude, it's my house and I'm not going to do it." The rest of the conversation goes absolutely nowhere. Meanwhile, I had just finished cleaning all of the poop off the upstairs toilet seat that was so caked on. I thought it was just divots in the enameled wood seat. So the standard of cleanliness comment really took me to a place. I get to the hospital, and my mom is telling me that she is so over my father. She is tired of having to ask him for money. Tired of not being able to do some activities with her volunteer friends because my dad refused to give her cash for the event. She is tired of feeling like my dad and brother's caretakers. She tells me she is over it, and I tell her that the environment at home is toxic and I think she should get out too. My mom said she didn't even know where to start in leaving, and I told her to start by finding a divorce attorney. Maybe that was it, maybe I've crossed the line. I do love my father. Despite being very selfish, he was never a bad father. He was there for me growing up, and he loves my mom and me and my brother to the extent that I think he can love anyone. But that doesn't change how completely toxic and stressful living with can be. I have been extremely hesitant to tell my mom to get a divorce from my dad. In my heart, it is something that I have felt for years. My mom has complained about a lot of these things for a long time, and I've always been sympathetic to my mom, but never have I explicitly said you need a divorce. It feels so wrong to root against my parents' marriage. It feels like I've turned my back on my father. But when he immediately turned combative over vacuuming, I felt like there was no point. It was the first time in 15 years I think I saw with such clarity just how unhelpful and miserable my dad could be, and I didn't want my mom around it anymore.